The coal bit into Elias Turner's face as he trudged across the endless expanse of snow-covered plains. 1910 had been cruel, taking his wife and leaving him with Clara, their fragile 8-year-old daughter. He had promised her a new life, one far from the crowded, judgmental towns where the wind might cut but solitude would heal. The cabin came into view at last, a squat, weathered structure that looked smaller in the photographs than it did in person. Yet something about it made Elias pause. The door seemed wider, the roof taller, the windows brighter, as if the cabin had quietly prepared itself for their arrival. He shook off the notion as fatigue and grief whispering tricks on his mind. Clara clutched his hand tightly. "It's cozy," she whispered. Elias knelt, brushing snow from her bonnet. "Cozy, yes, but it will be ours. All ours." As night fell, the cabin's single window glowed softly, reflecting the pale light of a half-hidden moon. Elias set down his pack, unlatched the door, and stepped inside. It smelled of pine, dust, and something indefinably warm, like memory itself. That night, the wind thrashed like a wild beast, rattling the walls and whistling through the cracks. Clara huddled under a threadbare quilt, shivering despite the small fire Elias had built. He noticed, with a creeping sense of unease, that the room felt larger than it had earlier. The ceiling seemed higher, the space between the hearth and the wall wider. "Daddy, it feels funny in here," Clara whispered. Elias chuckled nervously. "Funny how, sweetie?" Clara's eyes sparkled in the firelight. "Like there's more room, more space. For us." Elias tried to dismiss it as imagination, but even as he closed his eyes that night, he felt the faint, exhilarating pulse of something strange and alive within the cabin. Winter deepened and the cold grew relentless, yet the cabin continued to subtly change. One morning, Elias noticed a small study tucked into a corner he could have sworn wasn't there before. A tiny nursery appeared where Clara had claimed her corner of the room. Neighbors were perplexed. Old Mr. Grayson, a gruff man with little patience for magic or sentiment, visited. "Elias, your cabin looks bigger than last winter. You sure you haven't been seeing things?" Elias smiled politely but remained silent. He could feel it in his bones. This was no trick of the eye. The cabin was expanding, quietly, invisibly, almost purposefully. Clara, ever curious, discovered a folded yellowed envelope in the back of a drawer. The handwriting was elegant, looping, almost as if it had been written decades ago. It read, "To the family who needs a home. This cabin grows for those with love and patience. Care for it, and it will care for you." Elias read it aloud by the fire. Clara clutched it to her chest, eyes wide. "Do you think it can really grow?" Elias, for the first time since his wife passed, allowed himself to hope. "I don't know, sweetie, but maybe. Maybe it's alive, just like we are." The winter of 1911 was merciless. Snowdrifts blocked the roads for miles, and supplies ran low. Yet within the cabin, something remarkable happened. Cupboards were stocked with firewood, and crates of preserved food appeared where none had been before. Clara's eyes sparkled with wonder. "It's helping us, Daddy." "I knew it." Elias knelt by her, trying to hide tears. "Yes, yes, it is." He felt humility and awe, understanding that survival now was not just about grit. It was about trust in something greater than themselves. One gray morning, a shivering man appeared at the door, clothes soaked and lips blue. Elias hesitated. Strangers could be dangerous, but Clara's pleading eyes softened him. "Please, Daddy, maybe he needs help." They welcomed him in. The man, Samuel, warmed by the fire, shared stories of hardship and wandering. When he left days later, he turned to Elias and said, "I've stayed in many cabins in my life. Yours? It seems alive." Elias only nodded. He understood now. The cabin wasn't simply a structure, it was responding to the care and kindness within its walls. Spring arrived unexpectedly early. To Elias and Clara's astonishment, the cabin had a small indoor garden thriving beneath a newly formed skylight. Green shoots pushed through the soil, full of lettuce, herbs, and tiny tomatoes. "I didn't plant these," Elias murmured. Clara laughed, twirling among the greenery. "It's magic!" For the first time in months, they felt the weight of loss lift. The cabin had become more than shelter. It was a provider, a nurturing force, a miracle of its own making. By the next winter, Elias discovered more hidden letters tucked behind floorboards and in hollowed logs. Each one carried the same mysterious tone. "Your kindness grows as our walls grow. Share, and the cabin shall share." He realized that this home was not just a house, it was a living lesson. Every act of generosity, every smile, every small act of care made the space expand, giving life to those who entered. By 1912, people had begun to arrive at Elias's cabin, travelers caught in blizzards, families seeking warmth, and weary neighbors. The cabin always seemed to accommodate just enough space for each visitor. Elias marveled as he watched strangers sit by the fire, share stories, and leave transformed. He began to understand the cabin's true nature. It was a vessel for community, built not with timber and nails, but with empathy and human connection. Clara's 8th birthday came in the middle of a harsh winter. Elias had no money for gifts, nothing but the little he could offer in love. That night when Clara awoke, she found a small wooden rocking horse in the corner of her newly grown room. Tears filled her eyes. "Daddy, it's perfect." Elias knelt beside her, realizing he couldn't explain it. The cabin had given them this gift, silently teaching that love and joy could flourish even in the coldest winters. That winter arrived with a fury Elias had never seen. Snow drifts rose like frozen waves across the prairie, and the wind tore at the cabin's walls as if trying to pull them apart. The small settlement nearby was trapped, families huddled in freezing homes, livestock struggling to survive. Inside the cabin, Elias's heart raced. He feared they would be overwhelmed. But as the storm raged, a remarkable thing occurred. The cabin seemed to breathe. Walls stretched wider, corridors lengthened, and a massive fireplace ignited on its own, radiating heat sufficient for everyone inside. Neighbors arrived, eyes wide with disbelief, and the cabin welcomed them silently, giving shelter, warmth, and hope. That night, as Clara pressed close to her father, she whispered, "It's protecting us. It's alive, Daddy." Elias, watching the flames dance, realized the cabin had become a sanctuary, not just for him and Clara, but for anyone in need. Samuel, the man they had helped years before, returned, weaker now, his hair streaked with gray. His eyes shone with recognition as he entered the cabin. "Elias, Clara," he croaked, smiling faintly. That evening, he shared a quiet confession. "I've wandered for years, searching for a place that felt alive. Yours saved me once. Now it seems to be saving everyone." He fell asleep in a corner of the cabin, bathed in its warmth, and passed away peacefully during the night. Clara cried quietly, and Elias felt a profound understanding wash over him. The cabin didn't just provide shelter, it gave people dignity, rest, and hope. In the spring, while cleaning a rarely used hallway, Clara discovered a small staircase concealed behind a folding screen. She called Elias, and together they climbed. At the top was a room filled with books, journals, and artifacts left by travelers over the years. Every object told a story. A carved wooden toy from a lonely child, a letter of thanks from a weary mother, sketches from a wandering artist. The cabin had preserved their memories, becoming more than a home. It had become a repository of human kindness and connection. Elias realized that their lives were intertwined with countless others, and that the cabin's growth reflected the hearts it had touched. Over the next year, Elias began teaching neighbors and travelers practical skills: carpentry, farming, and cooking. As he shared knowledge, the cabin expanded subtly: an extra workbench, a wider kitchen, a brighter corner for children to learn and play. He discovered that every act of kindness created tangible change within the cabin. The more they gave, the more it responded, teaching Elias the quiet, miraculous truth: generosity begets growth, not just of structures, but of spirit. One harsh evening, a young widow named Martha arrived at the door, clutching her son and shivering. Elias welcomed them without hesitation, offering a room that seemed to have appeared just in time for their arrival. Clara and Martha's son laughed and ran through new corridors that had never existed before. Elias and Martha sat by the fire, sharing stories, fears, and hopes. They discovered resilience in one another, and a gentle love began to grow, not romantic yet, but a bond forged by shared hardship and the warmth of the cabin. By 1915, the cabin had grown into something resembling a small village within walls: rooms for families, spaces for shared meals, and even a small indoor orchard. Elias often sat by the fire with Clara, marveling at the transformation. He understood now. The cabin mirrored the lives of its occupants. Every act of kindness, every shared story, every moment of care caused it to expand. It was alive because of love, and love was its foundation. For the first time, Elias felt the weight of grief lift completely. The cabin had healed him, given purpose to Clara, and bound them to a larger community. One quiet evening, Clara wandered to a corner of the cabin she had never noticed. A glowing door appeared, faintly shimmering in the lamplight. With trembling hands, she opened it and found a mural stretching along the walls, depicting generations of families living within the cabin. The painting showed laughter, shared meals, and acts of courage and kindness. At its center, a simple inscription read, "Love builds what time cannot." Clara hugged her father tightly. "Daddy, it's not just a house. It's a heart." Elias nodded, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. The truth was undeniable. The cabin existed because of human love and compassion. Word spread, and more families arrived, drawn to the cabin's mysterious reputation. The once solitary cabin had become a hub of life, laughter, and learning. People farmed together, celebrated birthdays, and supported one another through harsh winters. And the cabin continued to grow, adapting to the needs of its inhabitants. It offered more rooms, wider corridors, larger kitchens, and additional fireplaces, yet never felt impersonal. It was a living, breathing testament to shared humanity. One unusually gentle winter, Elias sat with Clara by the fire. Children laughed in rooms that had not existed a decade prior, and neighbors shared stories of gratitude. Elias spoke softly to Clara. "We didn't build this with hammers, sweetie. We built it with our hearts." She smiled, understanding the profound truth. The cabin was a mirror of generosity, of love that multiplied when shared, a sanctuary for the weary and a home for the kind-hearted. Years passed. Elias grew older and eventually passed away quietly, leaving Clara as the cabin's keeper. She continued the tradition of welcoming travelers, teaching kindness, and nurturing growth within the home. The cabin continued to expand, season by season, winter by winter, as families came and went. The letters remained hidden, waiting for those who needed them most. Clara stood at the threshold, snow drifting across the prairie, and whispered, "Some cabins are made of wood, but this one is made of hearts." And so, the cabin lived on, a timeless reminder that love, compassion, and generosity create spaces far larger than any walls can hold.